Hi, my name is Frankie, and I sleep a lot. Do you also like to sleep? Of course, who doesn't? After all, sleep is the best medicine for all diseases. Only small children and old people do not like it seems. But I bet you can't beat me. How much do you usually sleep? 8, 9 hours? But I sleep almost 20 hours a day. Can you imagine? Yes, I have such a feature of the body. No, it's not a disease. I was just born that way. Since I was born, I slept a lot. My mother was at first confused, and then, when the doctor said that I was fine, there were no abnormalities, she began to take it calmly. That's how I grew up, by sleeping. My mother said that when I was a baby, she woke me up, specially to feed me, and then I passed out again. My family called me sleepy. As my dad told me, he and his parents were happy at first because I was so silent. I didn't cry much. I just slept. They could have left me with my grandparents and gone by their own business. But when I got older, it bothered them. The dream affected my development. I began to walk and talk later than everyone else, of course. I just didn't have time for this. And then it started. Hospitals, psychologists, even psychics. My parents made every effort to wake me up whenever I needed to be fed. I always woke up at different times and was awake for 4 hours a day, which is terribly small. I only had time to shower, eat, work out a little, and fall asleep again. My mother woke me up as soon as she could, with cold water and ammonia, and wouldn't let me lie down. But I could sleep even standing up. I couldn't make friends properly because I didn't spend enough time with them. I fell asleep on the bus and often went anywhere on the outskirts of the city, to cafes, where then the waiters couldn't wake me up if I was alone, in hospitals, while shopping, on the beach, even in the toilet. Can you imagine? My parents pulled me out of everything. It was a supreme disgrace. The most interesting thing is that the doctors equally shrugged their shoulders and said that there were no pathologies. I mean, I grew up healthy. I just liked to sleep. Then a friend advised my ancestors to take more stringent measures to prevent me from falling asleep. She said that if they wanted me to live a normal life, they would have to work hard. I was just 13 years old, and by that time I was doing some schoolwork. My mother tried to adjust my sleep schedule so that I would spend those 4 hours in class, and then they would come pick me up at school. I'm usually already asleep at the table. Everyone was shocked by me. At first, my classmates and teachers thought that I had serious psychological problems. And then, when they were convinced that I was clean, they began to ask why this was happening. I didn't know why, I just fell asleep. When I woke up, I did not feel any discomfort, dizziness, or nausea. As some say, I was fine. But it was starting to piss me off. I knew that this way I would sleep through everything in the world. I would never even have a girlfriend. Yes, there, girls, I won't be able to get married. Who needs an ever-sleeping husband? To fall asleep at my own wedding? To sleep through the birth of my children? And to sleep through their entire life? So one day, on a day off, when I was awake, my mother decided to take me to an amusement park. She chose a more or less safe but extreme slide there. And when I started to fall asleep, she took me there and told me to try to sleep well. I had just 4 minutes to sleep and we were off. It was my first ride in my life, and these new sensations woke me up as I walked. It was so nice to get a kick out of life and remember it. I was happy like a child, shouting, having fun, and I managed to buy myself more time. When the time was up, I asked my mother to take another ride. I didn't get off this ride 7 times in a row that day. The impressions were so vivid that I didn't sleep for another 2 hours. So we roughly found my anti-sleeping pill. From that day on, I went there every day to get enough energy. But as they say, nothing lasts forever. Gradually, the effect is weakened. I knew I wasn't getting as much adrenaline as the first time. That's right, adrenaline. That's what wakes me up, I said to myself, and ran home until I fell asleep. I got on the internet and started looking through the types of activities related to extreme sports, wrote out a list for myself, and noticed that one activity was extreme for another. There was also sports, boxing, hockey, soccer, and skydiving, bungee jumping, speedboat swimming, go-karting, running on hot coals. Once I even deliberately teased a pack of stray dogs and ran away from them as fast as I could. The charge from all this was enough for me for almost 12 hours, and it was progress. I charged myself in the morning like a phone so that I could spend the rest of the day doing useful things. You can't imagine, but I saw the sunrise and sunset for the first time in one day, saw my parents' faces properly, learned to drive a car, read normally, watched movies, went for a walk with friends, and finally felt weak in my body. This is a pleasant feeling of weakness from some cases. I was happy, but I didn't know if my imagination and money would be enough for all this for the rest of my life, because each of these activities cost money, and I didn't work, so I had to come up with a different way out. In general, I lived this way for another 4 years, and then my fantasy began to end, as well as the money in my family's wallet. I was already ashamed to ask, so every day I started sleeping more and more again. I asked my friend for advice, and he suggested that I become a biker. At first I thought it wasn't extreme enough, but he interrupted my train of thought and said I was wrong, because when you're driving on 2 wheels, every minute of the ride can be your last. Isn't that enough? He asked. And I thought, why not try it? I watched a lot of videos about the danger on the road among the 2-wheelers, remembered them, then went and rented a bike. I didn't have a teacher, except for the internet, so I started the Iron Horse and started off. My heart started pounding in my chest as if I'd been injected with adrenaline. But it was really cool. I learned to drive on a busy highway among cars. I was signaled in the back. I got a lot of insulted in my address, and still it was a very cool moment. When I was driving on an empty highway, it felt like I was flying over the side of the plane, because my speed was prohibitive. Since then, I've been driving every day. Gradually, my sleep interval increased again, and I was able to return to normal life. I tried to control every day, so over time, instead of renting a bike, I just bought one. So whenever I wanted to sleep, I just got behind the wheel and cut through the streets of the city. But then it turned out that this solution to the problem is temporary. In winter, it was absolutely impossible to ride a bike because it was too cold. I felt like a hibernating bear again. Every day my productivity went out, and I, already desperate, went to the pharmacy and asked if they had sleeping pills. There was a girl behind the counter, and she asked for a recipe, but I didn't have one. I must have looked too exhausted because she started asking me if I was all right. I shook my head and sat down. I started to fall asleep. For such cases, I had prepared a special piece of paper, which describes in detail my feature, name, age, and phone number of mom and dad. When I woke up, I saw that I was sleeping in the living room, and not far from me, in the dining room, my parents were sitting and talking to someone. It was a girl from the pharmacy. Geez, she probably told you about me. Still sleepy, I got up and went to them. My parents greeted me and said that this nice girl brought me home. I thanked her and was about to go back to my room, but she called out to me. "I know how to help you," she said suddenly. What? I couldn't believe my ears. I've lived like this almost my entire life, and no one can do anything about it. But here's a young pharmacist. I hesitated, but hoped. Tiffany, that was her name, came over to me, and I told her, and we sat on the sofa and talked about my dream. It turned out that she trained as a medic in India, where she learned many unconventional things in the field of medicine. She asked if I was ready to experiment with her, but I didn't lose anything. It doesn't matter if I'm dead or alive. It doesn't matter. She came out excited and returned to our home 3 days later. By that day, I was sleeping almost 18 hours a day again. According to my parents, Tiffany brought some cones of liquid with her, mixed them, and ejected them into my vein. At this time, I felt a burning sensation inside me and abruptly opened my eyes and screamed as if I saw the ghost of my late grandfather. My heart was about to jump out of my chest. I asked her what she was doing here, and when I calmed down, she told me that an old Hindu had invented a remedy for her grandmother, who had insomnia. It was like a sleeping pill, but without harm to health. Tiffany decided to use the knowledge and make the drug from the opposite angle, and voila! I do not know who this girl was sent to me, but her tool really helps me. She personally makes it for me, and now I only spend 8 hours sleeping. Besides, now I don't have to spend money on extreme sports. I didn't know how to thank this wonder girl, so a couple of years later, we got married.